June the 14th, 2026. Guys, you're looking at the 24-month study, and this is called the inflow scenarios from the U.S. Department of the Interior, Bureau of Reclamation. It deals with both the upper and the lower Colorado Basin regions. Now, we've talked about this report before and how they will do this every 24 months. And we've talked about how that they're planning for what's going to happen in 2027 has been advanced up until this summer, not next summer. And so there's a couple things here that are important. They're going to show you their plan for Powell and Lake Mead. And what we're seeing now, and we've discussed it lightly, is the fact that one, they're trying to do a balancing act between Lake Mead and Lake Powell. Let a little in more out of Lake Powell to keep Lake Mead up, and then kind of prop it up so that the infrastructure upstream at Lake Powell is not damaged by letting too much out and getting down into that trouble zone. But what we're seeing now is a move, guys, because they are realizing some of the numbers that you and I have been looking at, and that they may have to sacrifice Lake Powell completely now. And that changes a lot. The reason is because Flaming Gorge is letting out so much with no input from the Green River and other places, and no snowfall. And so again, Mead is going to be held up longer than Powell. And Powell is not going to make it very much longer at all. Probably maybe into August. But when that happens, then the 8,000 cubic feet per second that's coming into Mead will drop almost entirely. When that happens, then the rush down to all of the danger systems or the danger levels in Mead happen. We're going to soon be below the 1035 mark coming up in July. Around July 27th, 26th, somewhere like that, under current conditions. But what we're looking at again is going from the balance of two lakes to where now it's kind of an internal battle. The people upstream want to keep Lake Powell in good shape, but Mother Nature is not letting that happen. There is no summer monsoon setting up like we've seen in previous years, and there was no snowfall melt, and there doesn't look like there's going to be much this year either. But what they're talking about here, it says, in addition to the May 26, 24-month study based on the most probable inflow scenario and in accordance with the Upper Basin Drought Response Operation Agreement called DROA, Reclamation has conducted additional model runs in May to determine a possible range of reservoir elevations. Probable minimum and probable maximum models are conducted in January, April, August, and October. And I have the two charts. I'm going to show them, those to you in just a moment. One from Mead and one from Powell from this update. And the bad number, the bad figure into their equation, guys, is again, they were still trying to put into or calculate some type of monsoonal summer or some type of snowfall and coming up relief from that. It's just not going to happen. So they're going to be forced to, again, sacrifice Lake Powell. Their numbers here really are kind of meaningless because of their lack of future projection, or at least of the projections they're showing us. Let's look at those two charts. Now, let's go back to just last month into May, guys. May 2026, 24-month study inflow scenarios. The blue line represents we're getting some monsoonal rains in. We're going to get some snowfall in this year that will help next year, things like that. The green line is kind of an average in between it. The red line is the worst case scenario, okay? They're just a little off on it, but they're closer, much closer to what they projected for Mead than what they projected for Powell. Notice this dotted line right through here. That's the 1035 elevation mark. That's when you lose 70% of power. downstream from Lake Mead. Now, all three lines are very close to that here, but the red line actually touches it about right in here, and that's showing mid-September. But it's showing a dive starting right here into July and August. See that? And July is when our numbers are indicating it's going to hit 1035, so it's not that much off. But you see this little bump right here? This would be for monsoons, snowfall, things like that, an increase. That is not happening according to the current data coming from the weather satellites. Not happening at all. But what they do show because of that, it does show a continued drop on the worst case scenario down to about right here, which is 1025. Anyway, and for a prolonged period of time up until April of 2028. So, and then the dip is also in the medium line here. But again, we're back looking at about right here. We're in June now, which is here. And we're seeing a pretty steep dive when this bump does not look like it's going to happen at all. Now, Lake Powell, that's a little different because they were, at this point in May, going to do a balancing act between Powell and Mead. That's kind of getting pulled off the table. Showing a decline, let's go into where we're at now, June 2026, right here. Now, their minimum power pool is 3490. They're around 3525. But 3490 is the dotted line, and they show it getting very close to it, all the way up and not until March of 2027. And then a very high rebound because of snowmelt. Look at that. And when you look at Powell, it depends on complete snowmelt. All of that area, Green River, the other area, rivers that come in there, are all snow-fed tributaries. And they're at record lows right now. All of those in that area. But they're showing this rebound. But that's not going to happen. And this decline right here is not nearly steep enough. If you were to move this to about right here in August and bring these lines down to this line, you'd be much closer. Now, what's happening, and this is coming from the Bureau of Reclamation, they're saying activists and engineering critics are pointing out that the physical plumbing of Glen Canyon, that's at Lake Powell, cannot survive under loaded conditions. If the reservoir slices past the 34.9 or 3490 foot minimum power pool we looked at on the dotted line, this summer or next winter, the turbines automatically stop spinning anyway. Once power generation dies, the dam ceases to be a revenue-generating power plant and becomes nothing more than a giant bottleneck restricting downstream human water delivery. This river is essentially proving that "feel Mead first," in quotations, movement right through pure physics, regardless of what the Bureau decides to print in their upcoming December 26 rule book. Guys, they can take that December 26 rule book and throw it in the fire, because by December 2026, they're going to be fully aware of the catastrophe that is unfolded this summer. And looking at the overall situation, guys, I think what we're seeing now is the government knows they're just not going to let it all out at one time. Maybe a slow release as far as information to try to quell any panic moves, I guess. But that sounds so desperate and greedy and manipulative, because this is the one time the government needs to be straight up with the facts, let people know what's coming so they don't get hit in the face by a brick wall. It says the operational theater shows a massive division between public optimism and backroom emergency maneuvers. That's what I'm talking about, that backroom deal going on. In the public script, the Bureau continues to release most probable charts, suggesting the river system will naturally stabilize and that temporary cuts will save the reservoirs. But the reality they know is that the federal government knows the traditional rule book is dead. In January 2026, the Bureau released a massive 2026 Draft Environmental Impact Statement, outlining the mandatory unprecedented water cuts because the 7 basin states completely blew past their deadlines to agree on a solution. That's what we've just witnessed. And just this past week, Interior Assistant Secretary Andrea Travnicek delivered a brutal ultimatum to state governors. If they can't move their stakes to get closer, we're going to have to make the decision. I've said that all along. They will be forced to, because no one's going to willingly give up their share of water. It would first of all be political suicide. The federal government is actively preparing to strip states of their legal water rights by decree because the math has failed. Now, guys, if we go back to May 1st, they call it the May 1st mutiny, and what they're talking about is because the Bureau refused to completely throw out the rule book and force a Mead first reset, the entire system is gridlocking into a massive legal war. Again, you can stay in court till the river runs dry if you want to. It says the May 1st mutiny. Frustrated by the stalled process, the lower basin states, Arizona, California, and Nevada, completely bypassed the upper basin and submitted a unilateral proposal to the Bureau to force operations through 2028. In other words, if the upper river, if Powell and above that cannot agree, then we'll agree on our portion. But it starts at the top. And that's why we're looking at Flaming Gorge running dry very quickly. And guys, when that happens, Powell has to stop, and then Mead has to stop. 3 dominoes. It says, prepping for the Supreme Court, they're realizing that the federal government is about to slice their water supply by up to 57% to prevent Mead from crashing 1035. Guys, how are we fed fresh vegetables in the wintertime? It's through the Imperial Valley in California. If they get shut down this summer or fall, and guys, because of their milder seasons, it's not like here. They are in the South, they will start irrigating their fields earlier to saturate the ground before they plant, and use a lot of water to get everything ready. But again, it's the breadbasket of North America as far as that type of activity. And when you shut down Powell and then Mead, the Imperial Valley has nowhere to go. It says the Imperial Valley in California and the Yuma District in Arizona grow over 90% of the winter vegetables consumed in North America. 90%. Was this well planned out or what? These fields rely entirely on Colorado River water. When the Bureau cuts their supply to prevent Deadpool, grocery store shelves across the entire continent will go empty and food prices will skyrocket. Hoover Dam and Glen Canyon Dam provide clean power to millions of homes, hospitals, and water treatment plants across the Southwest. If the turbines fail, it will compromise the stability of the entire Western interconnection grid, causing rolling blackouts in the middle of a brutal summer heat waves. Guys, we talked about this many times, especially that fact right there and how it can cause mass migrations. And some of you I know are saying, VP, we've been over this, guys, but we haven't been over the changes of the Save Mead First issue that's coming up now. Plus, guys, it's the greatest human catastrophe in our lifetime is unfolding before our eyes. My father's leading me to stay on top of this in the sense that what really else matters right now? If you're a watchman, what else matters? But millions of people about to be displaced. And you can see it coming, and unless there's a miracle of a massive monsoon season and then a heavy winter snow, then it's inevitable. Cities like Phoenix, Tucson, and Vegas are entirely dependent on canals fed by the river. If water pressure drops too low, water treatment plants cannot physically function. What have we been talking about? Recycling the Lake Mead in Vegas, guys, recycling in Phoenix. This isn't just about people not being able to water their lawns. It's about water no longer coming out of the kitchen tap for millions of residents. It's a nightmare scenario, and I realize it is. There's nothing that we can do about it other than prepare, and you may be wanting to prepare to move. You may have no choice. The only choice you would have is, do you want to do it while you still can, or you want to get in some kind of gridlock on the highways? Or, we don't know exactly how that will play out. But once we go to 1035 in July at Mead, 70% of power goes down. There's going to be rolling blackouts during the heat of the day. And we talked about how a lot of people are not even aware of what's happening. And it's amazing because being here in central Mississippi, I can kind of understand it. It seems far away and things like that to most people. But for instance, yesterday I had to go pick up a couple of copper lugs. I was putting a switch into my solar power system here at home, and I needed 2 more lugs for the jumper. And it's a pretty big hardware store. I've been here my whole life, a lumber company hardware store, and the owner, we were talking about maybe we're going to get some rain here from the tropical system that's out into the Gulf of America. And he said, well, we may, and it looks like that Vegas is about to get their monsoon rain and get Lake Mead back up out of nowhere. I hadn't mentioned it. I looked at him for a moment, very intelligent, college educated, very good businessman, pretty well off. And I looked at him and I said, his name's Andy. I said, Andy, you're not paying attention to it. I said, we don't live there and I understand it, but Mead and Powell was in big trouble. He said, but 3 years ago, I saw on the news the rains had filled Mead back up. I said, yeah, it did. But that's 3 years ago, and they didn't have enough sense then to slow anything down or start prepping. His eyes kind of glazed over, and he didn't know if I was pulling his leg or not. He walked off. Anyway, that is the reaction that we're seeing. It's going to come back. It's going to come back. Don't worry about it. Because even if you rained all summer, the lakes could rise up, but you're not going to get that winter melt that brings all of the upstream water down to places like Mead. Local governments and real estate developers have spent years downplaying the crisis to protect property values and keep corporate investments flowing. Makes sense when some people appear not to know, doesn't it? Delayed emergency triggers. The Bureau system relies on formal, slow-moving bureaucratic declarations rather than real-time physics. You and I are watching the real-time physics. They wait for annual studies to announce cuts, hiding the fact that the lake is actively dropping 1/4 of a foot every single day. The psychological blind spot is that most people simply cannot comprehend that a system as massive as the Colorado River can stop working. They assume that if things get bad enough, the government will simply fix it or pipe water from somewhere else, completely ignoring the fact that the water physically does not exist. And guys, let's go back to California just a moment, to the Imperial Valley. Of course, you got the one in Arizona too. But the Imperial Valley is really the absolute center of the crisis. Now, we're talking about migration out of the desert, things like that and all, but you cannot migrate the agriculture that grows in the Imperial Valley. So how many horsemen are going to ride at one time? It's the single most vulnerable domino because it sits at the intersection of all 3 critical pillars: water, food, and power. When the river forces a shutdown, the impact will ripple across the entire continent almost immediately. So the Imperial Irrigation District, called the IID, holds the most senior water rights on the entire Colorado River. Guys, all of that is pretty much null and void. It will be pretty soon anyway. But the feds will completely take over, and there won't be any more arguing or anything like that. Maybe some protests, but the argument is over. It's said and done. Says again that holds the most senior water rights on the entire Colorado River, consuming 3.1 million acre-feet per year, more than the entire state of Arizona combined. But that valley is huge. Says the legal standoff is under the historical 1922 rule book, which was an insane setup because they created the rules, guys, in an extremely rainy season. And they were calculating, because of that season, about 17,000 cubic feet per second or something, that natural river flow, when it actually, and that's where they made all their numbers up in 1922, but the actual river flow was about 13,000, so they were over-calculated from Jump Street. But it says, under the historical 22 rule book, the Bureau of Reclamation cannot legally cut Imperial Valley's water until juniors like Phoenix and Las Vegas are drained to zero. That's a rule book. That's man's rules. We're going by nature's rules now. The imminent cutoff says the federal government is preparing to throw out that rule book when Lake Mead crashes. The Bureau will be forced to execute emergency federal takeovers, bypassing senior legal rights to protect municipal drinking water. If the Imperial Valley's flow is cut by even 20%, the canal infrastructure will lose the physical pressure required to push water to the fields. So it can't go below 80%. You understand what I'm saying? Or it's useless at that point. There's no way to prop that up and maintain that. And again, the food chain shock. It says from November to March, this single valley produces over 90% of the salad greens, broccoli, cauliflower, and winter vegetables consumed in the U.S. and Canada. If the canals run dry or lose pressure this summer, planning for the winter harvest cannot occur. Grocery store shelves nationwide will empty of fresh produce within weeks, driving food inflation to unprecedented heights and causing immediate structural food shortages. Atlas is shrugging. I said it maybe 15 years ago that certain places on the planet are way overpopulated. And I caught a lot of flack about that. They're saying, we got so many square acres and square miles in the country, there's no way it can be overpopulated. When half of it, or almost half of it, is a desert, yes, you can. You can overpopulate it. You can you can out-demand the supply of water. And we've seen it happening. What do you do about it? Well, the first thing you do is, you don't want to start killing people off, but you dang sure don't want millions of people coming from different countries during a critical time like this. And so, I'm not talking about the workers. I'm talking about the freeloaders and the grifters and the ones that are committing all this fraud. Now, but what's going to happen? The workers will have nothing to do also. No way to feed themselves. No way to pay their bills. That's what they do. The truckers, the grocery stores, packagers, delivery people, name it. It's a big chain reaction collapse. Atlas is shrugged, and something is about to change. And I know we focused mostly on Mead, but let's go back to Powell for just a minute, because it's saying that Lake Powell is the exact heart of the crisis. Think about it. And monitoring it is the only way to predict when Lake Mead will completely destabilize. If Lake Powell fails, Mead's fate is legally and physically sealed. The real-time data from Powell confirms that the entire system has transitioned from a structural decline to an acute operational collapse. As of right now, Lake Powell is sitting at 3527. This is a little bit old, and by the way, we haven't had much of an update on these water heights since Friday morning. Anyway, as of right now, Lake Powell is sitting at 3527. To the general public, this looks like a stable number, but the underlying mechanics show it as a mathematical illusion. The refill failure, June is historically, we're in June, the peak month where melting snow forces a massive vertical spike in Powell's elevation. Right now, the lake is rising by a microscopic 0.05 feet per day, not 0.26, 0.05, and that's because they have drained the upper sections. They're going to let Flaming Gorge sacrifice itself. It will be shut off. Green River, the other rivers there, again, I've said that. They don't have the snow. That is the backup booster plan. The tallest mountains in southern Colorado, 0 snow. And so looking at that upstream information, it says rivers feeding Lake Powell are currently flowing at a brutal 18.55% of their historical June average. Not even 20%. The total inflow into the reservoir for water year 2026 has collapsed, to just 47.9% of normal. Powell did not get a summer refill, neither is Mead, neither did Flaming Gorge. It is flatlining at the exact time of year it is legally mandated to bank its water. In other words, you store everything you can in these dams during the snow melt or monsoon to use for the drier times. The batteries are dead because Powell's natural inflows have vanished. Think about that. The Bureau of Reclamation is executing its emergency 24-month study protocol to prevent Powell from hitting its 3,490-foot minimum power pool cliff. Again, they started this, again, from the Bureau of Reclamation less than a month ago. We saw them drop down to about 6 million acre feet. And we were looking at a cubic feet per second release of around 7,000. Okay? But just a few days back, they brought it back up to 8,000 plus coming out of Powell. And that's when this became the death sentence for not just Mead, but Powell too. In other words, Save Mead is now being pushed forward. Powell is going to be sacrificed, as well as Flaming Gorge. But what happened? That creates a whole new problem on just general river flow, not lake flow, but river flow itself. And guys, why did they have to do that? Why did they go from the 6 million acre feet back up to the 7.5 to 8.2? 3 million acre feet, it says, because Lake Mead requires a minimum baseline release of 7.5 to 823 million acre feet from Powell just to break even with lower basin consumption and evaporation. By choking Powell's outflow down to 6 million acre feet to save Glen Canyon, the Bureau has effectively sacrificed Lake Mead. They had. This was in May. Now it's changing. I'm just showing you how quickly. That 1.5 million acre feet deficit is the exact mathematical force pulling Mead down to the predicted 1030-foot mark by July, the one we calculated here. And I think part of this now Save Mead as for the last stand, guys, is because really they're playing politics in the sense that they really don't have a choice, so let's just jump on the bandwagon. It says the ultimate catastrophe is that sacrificing Mead won't even save Powell. Total outflows from Glen Canyon Dam are still outpacing natural mountain inflows by 1,020,000 acre feet. The system is burning through its assets at a staggering rate coming out of the Lake Powell water data. The Bureau's official tracking models show that once the artificial emergency water pumped from Flaming Gorge wraps up, Powell will resume a steep downward trajectory. Of course it will. So Powell is projected to strip away its remaining buffer and plummet towards the 3510 feet by the end of the water year. Under the absolute minimum probable scenario, the reservoir is on a direct track to slide below the 3490-foot hydropower floor. When that happens, nothing goes to Mead. Now, it wasn't in the report that I showed you from the Bureau about the projections for Lake Mead and Powell, but there is projections for Flaming Gorge, not in that document. They haven't given an exact calendar date from Flaming Gorge, but if you look at the 2-year speculation, they were projecting it to last until April 30th, 2027. It says, again, they haven't given the exact calendar date when it will stop flowing entirely, but Flaming Gorge is in a hard operational deadline. And April 30th, 2027, they'll never see it because it's going to go down before Powell does. Under the current Drought Response Operation Agreement, DROA, the Bureau is legally mandated to drain up to 1 million acre-feet out of Flaming Gorge to prop up Lake Powell over a strict 12-month window. While the emergency tap is scheduled to run through next April, again, old math, the physical math on the ground shows the reservoir hitting major operational walls long before that. Again, plans that do not match. And guys, with different information coming in, the Bureau is starting to realize that 2027 number is just smoke in the wind because, again, we're focusing now on Flaming Gorge. It says the September 2026 marina crash. As the Bureau drains the reservoir at full capacity, local managers warn the pool elevation will plunge down to 6,000 feet by September. At that level, boat ramps are completely high and dry, grounding all recreational infrastructure. That kills the entire business model around the lake. That's a lot of people depend on that. It says a 6,010-foot drinking water lockout. Local water managers note that when Flaming Gorge drops 6,010 feet, guys, listen if you're up there, the floating pumps that supply potable water to the regional infrastructure lose access to the 1/3 depletion point. At that time, they're saying again, April 27th deadline hits, the Bureau's own models show the lake will have dropped 35 vertical feet, stripping away nearly 1/3 of Flaming Gorge's entire active storage capacity. Guys, just move that April 2027 up to this September. And that is being very conservative. And putting in the data proves it, guys. It says the April 2027 date is just a bureaucratic paper deadline. But the physical collapse of Flaming Gorge is locking in for this fall. The Bureau's models assume a steadily controlled drain, but real-world conditions have accelerated the reservoir's timeline to a breaking point. Field reports and marina operators on the ground at Flaming Gorge, like Buckboard Marina, have officially sounded the alarm that by September this year, 2026, the reservoir will drop to the critical 6,000-foot floor. Guys, and it can only go to 610 before you lose the drinking water. The rapid summer drop, here it goes, this breaks all the bureaucratic claims. The water level is already falling so fast that it will drop 12 to 15 feet by July, and a staggering 25 to 30 foot vertical foot drop by September. Now, dropping to 6,000 feet at Flaming Gorge exposes over 400 feet of bare mud and shoreline. It leaves every boat ramp high and dry and completely shuts down the upper basin's infrastructure before winter even arrives. Now, some are starting to call that 2027 Bureau piece of paperwork pure fiction. We're looking at the information coming up from above Flaming Gorge. Now, the dead Green River, which is the main artery feeding Flaming Gorge, has seen its inflows completely flatline. There's no mountain water coming from behind to replace what is being sucked out. That's from KRQE, guys. They're in the area. No mountain water. No snow is why. It says, because the Bureau underestimated how fast Lake Powell is crashing, they are pulling water from Flaming Gorge at maximum capacity. Listen, that's a panic mode. They know the truth. But again, they're pulling water from Flaming Gorge at maximum capacity right now to keep Glen Canyon Dam's turbines from spinning into a de facto dead pool state. So they're draining Flaming Gorge to keep themselves alive and to keep enough water coming out to keep Mead alive. Pretty lose-lose situation. And being completely conservative, shows a total system storage capacity across Mead, Powell, and Flaming Gorge will collectively hit an unprecedented structural breaking point by no later than October. And it says because the Green River is essentially dead right now, the natural plumbing behind the reservoir has completely unraveled. The Bureau of Reclamation's actual unmanaged inflow data shows the upper basin is completely starved of water. Again, from the Bureau. The May collapse, Flaming Gorge only received 7,211 acre-feet of inflow for the entire month of May. That is a catastrophic 28% of the historical average. The June reality is that the Bureau forecast a small June bump of 160,000 acre-feet, but the field gauges show that because the snow melted weeks earlier, it evaporated and soaked into the ground, guys, before it hit the rivers. The water never materialized. The natural inflow is tracking down towards the single digit. Now, at Flaming Gorge this summer, guys, July is projected to drop at 69,000 acre-feet, and August will hit a bone-dry 30,000 acre-feet, just 42% of an already low baseline. The reason the lake is cratering towards a 6,000 foot floor by September is the sheer mathematical imbalance between what nature is providing and what the Bureau is sucking out of it. The Green River supplying less than 2,300 acre-feet per day on average. Again, inflow 2,300 acre-feet, but the outflow, that's what's critical. To fulfill the emergency, again, Bureau words, to fulfill the emergency 1.0 million acre-feet released to save Lake Powell, the dam has to pump out an average of 3,200 to 4,600 cubic feet per second. But the Green River is only supplying about half of that if you look at the 4,600. That translates to losing up to 9,000 acre-feet of water every single day. And that means that Flaming Gorge is running a net loss of 6,700 acre-feet of water every 24 hours. Even when localized storms hit Wyoming and northern Utah, the tributaries aren't responding because the mountain soil is so dry it acts like a brick of parched clay, absorbing 100% of the rainfall before it can even trickle into the Green River channel. And again, putting all that together is where they are getting this shoreline straight, dropping the shoreline straight down to the 6,000 foot floor by September. And then you're past the ability to pump anything out. And breaking it down, guys, in the current phase, it says nature shuts off. This is phase 1 of the domino effect. Nature shuts off the mountain snowpack of the 14ers. That's the 14,000 foot mountains that usually have snow on them most of the time, starving the Green, the Gunnison, and the San Juan tributaries. The reaction is that Flaming Gorge is drained at maximum capacity, losing 200,000 acre-feet a month to prop up Lake Powell. The breaking point by September, Flaming Gorge crashes again to 6,000 foot floor, grounding all infrastructure. The upper backup tank is officially empty. That's when the second domino hits, Lake Powell runs out of life support. When Flaming Gorge exhausted, Powell loses its artificial buffer. Powell's true historic low hydrology takes over. The reservoir plummets directly towards its 3,490 foot minimum power pool cliff. And the breaking point is at Glen Canyon, which is Lake Powell. Its dam turbines stop spinning. The Bureau of Reclamation is legally and physically forced to cut downstream water release to Lake Mead down to the absolute bare legal minimum of 6 million acre-feet or lower. Guys, they're talking about a release from Powell to Mead when Powell is collapsing too. In other words, they're saying maintain a legal minimum. Nature has no legal minimum. What we're seeing is the art of war by nature. Atlas is shrugged completely. And the reason I say that is you look at the space satellites. The drought has set in. The El Nino has set in. You've got record-breaking temperature on the ground. In other words, nature has attacked from all sides, and from the up from the looking at it from the satellites into the upper atmosphere to the ground, complete surrounding and a complete take back of the way it was meant to be. Now, quickly, let's take a look at the Lower Colorado River report, guys, and that's Mead, Lake Mojave, Davis, and Lake Havasu at Parker Dam. But just focusing on a couple things here. First, we haven't had an update since Friday. See this right here? And if you look down, they didn't even complete Friday. And we were at 10:47:59. Slow drain in here because they're popping up a lot coming out of Powell. But again, they ended this at the 5 o'clock hour or so, the 3 o'clock hour on Friday, and just stopped sending reports. Nothing yesterday, nothing today so far. Usually it's a day behind on some of the information, but it's a little unusual. Again, you can see Saturday through Thursday, and then Friday, they just shut it off right here. Again, I don't know if it's some kind of, is it Flag Day or something? I'm not sure if that would cause that, but I don't like it when they don't give us the information when times are getting critical. Could be just me, some kind of other glitch, don't know yet. Guys, in that particular feed we just looked at was the one that I always go to give you the actual live time. This is the one that usually is a day behind right here. So the one on the that's normally live shut down afternoon of Friday, but this one shut down Thursday. This is also Lake Mead water database. It's averaging it's not averaging. That was the point of the feet of drop on Thursday at 0.19. Inflow 89, outflow is almost double, not quite. But snowpack 1.8% of what they expected is what they got. So again, no updates. Now Thursday, Friday, Saturday, this is Sunday. And even the water level as of Friday, I'm not sure how that has changed because we're not getting the information. And if you look at, there's a marina there that has a webcam there. It's called Temple Bar on YouTube. It's got the current time and temperature, but it has an outdated elevation. They are also waiting on the numbers, I guess. But again, I just wanted to point this out. And if I scroll this down just a moment, it's the water level history going back to last June 4th. You can see it was up around 10:55:81, and now we are at 10:47:68. Again, that is as Thursday. But here's what the problem is now. Back in November, it really started in October, they started to get some rain, snow piling up, melt, things like that, and getting the levels up, right? But this bump may not happen at all this year. And you could just kind of continue this line right here straight down. I'll be watching the guys for them to update the actual depth of the water now. It's dropping quick, but still averaging 0.26. So we're getting a foot in a little less than every 4 days. That's not going to last much longer at all. Getting into 10:35, we're just maybe not even 13 feet away from that now. But we're watching it, guys. You watch it. I love every one of you. Our Father loves you. It's a heads up. Be safe.